In this video I'll take you along as I build the ultimate play castle for my kids, complete with a slide, a swing, a playhouse, a sandbox and even more. I started this project thinking this will be quick, but oh boy, was I wrong. Turns out building a castle is just as epic as it sounds. Long hours, plenty of challenges and a lot of sawdust. But trust me, the result is worth it. So grab your tools or just grab some popcorn and let's dive into the chaos and magic of building a backyard castle. Good morning YouTube and welcome back to my channel.
To begin, I grabbed a blank sheet of paper and started sketching. I let my imagination run free, thinking about what Hogwarts might look like if it were built for kids. The turrets, the Great Hall and plenty of fun features came to life on the page.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Next, it was time to bring the ideas to the digital drawing board. Now I'll be honest, I'm no Fusion 360 expert. My plan is far from perfect, but learning how to create this design taught me so much along the way. The design process was challenging but rewarding. While it might not be a professional blueprint, it's packed with hard and careful thought, enough to make sure every piece fits and the structure stays safe. And in addition, by exporting a parts list of the designed plan, I was able to prepare 90% of the required parts in my workshop. And here it is, the castle design, complete with a sprinkle of Hogwarts magic. Seeing it come to life, even digitally, is so exciting. Now it's time to take this vision from the screen to the garden. Every DIY project has its hidden challenges, and for this one, it started with the wood. Back in the winter of 2019, we were deep into renovating our house. One of the biggest changes? A brand new roof. The old roof was completely removed and I wasn't about to let that beautiful sturdy wood go to waste. I saved the wood from the old roof trusses for projects just like this one. The beams were solid, but they came with a catch. Nails. Lots and lots of nails. I spent hours pulling them out, every last one, or so I thought. Of course, for the nails I didn't catch, my trusty nail finder 3000, also known as my thickness planer, found them for me. Needless to say, it wasn't thrilled. Using this kind of thickness planer for this amount of work isn't ideal in my opinion. If you haven't a jointer as well, it's tricky to get perfect right angles. But it's what I had, and I had a lot of wood to prep. It took me about 2 weeks of endless planing. And as you can see, some of the beams were pretty heavy, which you can see on my face. I also encountered other obstacles, such as the fact that the beam tilts easily without roller blocks, and so the planer almost fell off the table. My homemade dust collection system also got a serious workout. I thought the bin was big enough, until I emptied it 10 times. And yes, I forgot to check it twice, which meant a full-on system clog. Maybe it's time to add a sensor that warns me before disaster strikes. However, I didn't just use recycled wood. To complete the castle, I bought a few meters of 5 by 8 centimeters beams for the framework, and some boards for the exterior walls, for the floor and the roof, which I also planed. If you don't have recycled wood on hand, I'd recommend starting with pre-planed lumber, it saves a ton of time. Oh, and if you're curious about the dust collection system I built, I've linked the video series here. It's definitely an adventure of its own. After countless hours of hard work, the wood was finally ready, smooth, straight and ready to transform into something great. Now it was time to dive into the real work, preparing and assembling the individual pieces of the castle. This is where things got both creative and technical. One of the beams had two larger cracks in the middle, so I decided to add some bow tie inlays for stabilization. Or, let's be honest, mostly for aesthetics. It probably wasn't necessary, but it gave the beam a beautiful handcrafted look. You could say I was still very motivated at this point, thinking I'd be done with the project in no time. After stabilizing this particular beam, I moved on to cutting all other beams to the correct lengths with my miter saw. Some pieces needed extra work, so I crafted mortise and tenon joints for added strength. For these, I switched between my miter saw, router and chisels. It was a lot of effort, but it made the connection solid. I built the larger parts, such as the stairs, completely in the workshop. At least the parts that I knew would still fit through the door. That would save me a lot of time during the final assembly. At least that's what I thought at the time. The staircase was one of the major features, so I built it completely in the workshop. I started with two wide beams, carefully routing slots into them using a jig I built specifically for this task. The jig made it easy to ensure each slot was perfectly aligned. For the steps themselves, I glued two boards together for extra strength and durability. Afterwards, I placed the boards in routed slots and then I hammered the second beam against them. The result? A sturdy staircase that's ready for countless safe climbs. I also worked on the frames for the windows and the door using 5x8 cm beams. Simple yet strong. These frames would give the castle its defining character and structure. Once complete, they were set aside, ready for assembly later. With each step, the castle was taking shape, one beam and board at a time. The excitement was building, literally. Beside building the frames for the windows and the door, no magical castle is complete without a tower. And for this project, I wanted something truly unique. A feature that not only stands out but also sparks imagination. I'd never seen anything quite like this turret before, so I designed it from scratch. Building it was challenging but rewarding. Its whimsical shape made it a centerpiece of the playhouse, giving the structure its storybook charm. But as much as I loved working on the castle, life has a way of reminding you what's truly important. That summer, my wife and I welcomed our second child into the world. It was a whirlwind of sleepless nights and joyful chaos, and the project naturally slowed down. Just one of the reasons why it took me about 9 months to complete this project, but that doesn't really matter. Being a dad is the most incredible adventure, and one that can't be rushed. This castle isn't just about swings, slides, or even the playhouse itself. For me, it's about something much deeper, creating memories. The kind of memories my father gave me when we built a treehouse together. He didn't just build a treehouse, he built a connection, a place where we laughed, built and spent time together. That's what made it special. And that's the gift I want to give my own kids. I still remember the smell of the wood and the sound of the hammer. My father passed away almost 2 years ago, and not a day goes by that I don't miss him. This project is my way of honoring him, of carrying on what he taught me. Not just how to build something with my hands, but how to build something meaningful. Dad, if you could see this, I think you'd be proud. Not because the castle is big or fancy, but because it's full of heart. Just like the treehouse you built with me. Thank you for teaching me that the real gift isn't the wood, the nails or the paint. It's the time we spend together and the memories we create. I'll carry that lesson with me forever. As the castle started to come together, it was time to focus on the foundation. To ensure the structure would be stable and safe, I needed custom ground anchors for the castle's pillars. But of course, nothing about this project could be simple. There are plenty of ground anchors available for purchase, but none in the size I needed for my 130 by 70 mm beams. So I had to get creative. I decided to make my own using a piece of 5 mm steel from an old tank which I bought on a scrapyard. Using my angle grinder, I cut the steel into the exact shapes I needed for the anchors. For the part of the anchor that would sit in the concrete, I reused old rebar. Initially, I tried cleaning the rust with a wire brush attachment on my grinder, but that was taking forever. Instead, I found a rust converting solution that worked wonders, turning the rust into a protective primer. I applied the rust converter after the welding process, which you will see later on. I even attempted to bend one piece to form a curve, but that didn't work out as planned. Instead, I welded the pieces together to get the perfect fit, and welding gave the anchors the strength they needed to securely hold the pillars in place. Before welding everything together, I drilled holes into the steel plates for the bolts. Making these custom anchors was a lot of work, but knowing they'll keep the castle sturdy and safe made it all worthwhile. Plus, it's always satisfying to solve a problem with a bit of DIY ingenuity. Once the pieces were assembled, I applied a layer of rust converter to all the metal surfaces, followed by a metal primer. To give the anchors a sleek and durable finish, I painted them matte black. They might be hidden under the castle, but that's no reason to skip on quality. With the ground anchors ready, it was time to head outside and start bringing the castle to life. Next up, moving all the parts from the workshop to the garden, where the painting fun can begin. With the structure almost complete, the final touch before assembly was painting all the wood. A good wood stain not only protects the material, but also ensures it's safe for kids, especially in enclosed spaces like the playhouse. But let me tell you, this step came with a hard lesson. I went to a specialty paint store and got the best stain they recommended. It was completely safe for kids, unlike standard stains that can release harmful fumes. Especially important for indoor spaces like the little house. At nearly $100 for 2.5 liters, it wasn't cheap, but I thought it would be plenty. Spoiler alert, I was very wrong. I underestimated how much stain I'd need, by a lot. What started as $100 for one can turned into $600 worth of paint by the time I was done. Lesson learned: when you're working on a project this size, plan for way more stain than you think you'll need. If you're tackling a build like this, consider using better quality wood which you don't need to paint like large or pressure treated wood. It's more expensive upfront, but it might save you money and time in the long run. The staining itself was a marathon. Every beam, plank and post needed at least 2 coats, and it felt like the painting would never end. But I had some help. A huge thank you to my mom, who pitched in and helped me power through this step. Without her, I'd probably still be painting. Despite the cost and the hours of work, it was worth it. The wood is not only protected, but also safe for the kids to play on inside and out. With the wood stained and ready, The castle was one step closer to becoming a garden dream come true. Next up, assembling the anchors and bigger parts like the ladder wall. With the wood prepped and painted, it was time to mount the anchors on the pillars. A task that brought its own special moments along the way. To start, I needed to mount 11 custom steel anchors to the castle's pillars. The first step was carefully marking and pre-drilling the holes. This step is crucial to prevent the wood from splitting when driving in the screws. These anchors are the foundation of the entire structure, making sure the castle stays stable and secure, no matter how much the kids play on it. While I was working, my little helper showed up, my son. He was fascinated by the tools and insisted on joining in. These father-son moments are the kind you never forget. Watching him so curious and eager to help reminded me why I started this project in the first place. Even though his help may have slowed me down a bit, those moments together were priceless and made the entire process even more special. Next, it was time to assemble another key feature of the castle, the ladder wall. To start, I drilled 25mm holes into the base beam. Then I used my router to make the openings slightly larger for a perfect fit. For the rungs, I used square timber instead of round sticks. I rounded the edges to make them safer and more comfortable for climbing. Once the rungs were glued in place, I carefully aligned the second beam of the ladder and tapped it into position. The end result: a sturdy functional wall that doubles as a climbing ladder. The castle's framework was the next big step, and this part required precision. My backyard isn't very large, so I started by creating a life-sized wooden template of the castle's foundation to determine the best position. The 1:1 scale template made it easy to visualize how the castle would fit in the space. Once it was aligned, I marked the outlines with marking spray, paying extra attention to the exact positions of the posts. This step was crucial, especially in a small yard like mine, to ensure everything fit perfectly without crowding other areas. After marking the layout, I used an earth auger to dig holes for the pillars. This tool saved me a ton of effort. Digging the holes was surprisingly satisfying. Once the holes were ready, I raised the wooden template off the ground by about 20 centimeters. This allowed me to easily position each pillar in its hole while keeping everything perfectly aligned with the blue lines marking the castle's footprint. If you're wondering why the garden looked so chaotic, it's because this wasn't our only project. Alongside the castle, we were also building a driveway, a garden fence, and a soakaway drain. Let's just say our backyard was one giant construction zone that summer. To ensure the pillars were perfectly straight, I built a second template, identical to the first, and secured it to the tops of the pillars. With both templates in place, the framework came together beautifully. Now I won't lie, there are probably better methods to do so, because this took me 2 full days to get everything right. It might look like it only took 30 minutes in the video, but trust me, it was a lot of work. With the framework in place, the castle's structure was starting to take shape. Now it was time for some heavy lifting. To secure the posts, I needed to fill the holes with concrete. This step was all about ensuring the castle had a rock-solid foundation. For the concrete, I mixed 4 parts concrete gravel with 1 part cement and enough water to get the right consistency. Once the mix was ready, I carefully poured it into each pillar hole, making sure the anchors were fully embedded. This step was physically demanding, but absolutely necessary to ensure the posts were stable and wouldn't shift over time. Once all the holes were filled, I let the concrete cure completely. This took some patience, but once it was done, the foundation was ready to support the next phase of the build. With the pillars firmly in place, I moved on to building the floor of the first story, the playhouse floor. Most of the work here involved attaching pre-prepared wooden beams with standard wood screws. Since this was a repetitive task, I filmed it in a time-lapse. The pre-cut wood made it straightforward, but it was still a lot of work to get everything just right. For example, I used half lap joints in the middle and on 2 beams on the side, which I cut on site with my Japanese saw. Before attaching the floorboards, I installed the staircase. This made it much easier to climb up and down while working on the structure without needing a ladder. The staircase was already pre-assembled in the workshop, so mounting it here was quick and straightforward. Having the staircase in place was a game changer. It made moving between the ground and the playhouse so much easier and saved me countless trips up and down a ladder. Once the staircase was secure, I moved on to the floorboards. Each plank was screwed tightly into place, creating a sturdy and safe surface for the playhouse. With the floor finished, it was time to move upward. I started assembling the upper frame of the playhouse, carefully aligning and securing each piece. This step began to define the castle's iconic shape. To screw each piece to the floor, I simply used pocket holes. And guys, always make sure the camera is running. The floorboards were some of the few parts that I didn't prepare. I still had to paint these too. I decided to do this after I had assembled them to save paint. The advantage of these summer temperatures is that the paint dried extremely quickly, so I didn't have to wait very long before I could continue working on the frame. With the walls and floor complete, it was time to tackle one of the trickiest parts, the roof. What might look simple in the video was anything but in reality. Let me tell you, a few extra hands would have been a dream come true. Each beam had to be secured to the walls at the base and connected at the top to a small octagonal board. Honestly, I felt like I was auditioning for a circus act. To cover the roof, I used leftover unplaned wood boards. Recycling these scraps not only saved money, but also the use of scrap wood is very satisfying for any woodworker. Piece by piece, the roof started to take shape. If you're wondering what's happening in the background, yes, that's the rest of the summer's chaos. The driveway was halfway paved, the fence foundations were freshly poured, and the entire yard was one big construction zone. Multitasking level expert. With one side of the castle taking shape, it was time to shift focus to the other side, the platform where the climbing wall will eventually go. This section was key to connecting all the elements of the castle into one cohesive structure. The ground posts for the platform were already in place, secured with concrete and aligned perfectly. I started by connecting them with the upper frame, carefully screwing everything into place to ensure it was sturdy. Once the frame was solid, I moved on to the floorboards. These were the same style as the playhouse floor. Simple, robust and securely fastened. Bit by bit the platform took shape. Next came the biggest challenge yet. Literally, the thickest beam in the entire build, which I like to call the main beam, needed to be mounted. This beam connects the platform to the playhouse and will later on support the swings. Directly above the main beam, I added a second beam. This will form the ceiling of the tunnel connecting the two parts of the castle. Once it was secure, I began attaching planks on top of the main beam to create the tunnel floor. Little by little, the tunnel started to come to life, a fun feature that ties the playhouse and platform together. With the base and ceiling of the tunnel in place, it was time to add the side beams and start enclosing it. I secured the side beams first, then attached planks to form the walls of the tunnel. Each piece was carefully aligned to make sure everything fit snugly and looked seamless. I also added a few small windows as eye catchers. With the major framework done, it was time to focus on some smaller details. I started by adding the plank wall to the platform in front of the playhouse. This wall gives the platform a finished look, while adding an extra layer of safety for the kids. Next, I added a railing to the staircase. While I worked, my son decided to drop by for a visit. He couldn't resist testing out my work, and I'll admit, having a little quality control inspector was pretty motivating. Of course, with the castle still unfinished, we always made sure someone was there to supervise him closely. After finishing the smaller details, I moved on to one of the most iconic features, the playhouse tower. I started by mounting 3 sturdy supports, 2 shorter ones on the outside and a longer one in the center for extra stability. With the supports in place, it was time to attach the tower's frame. Thankfully, I had help from a colleague for this step, as the frame was heavy and awkward to maneuver. Once the frame was in place, it was time to secure it. I'm pretty sure I used about 1000 screws. Well, maybe not quite that many, but it definitely felt like it. With the frame locked in, I began building the stairs inside the tower and cladding its walls with wooden planks. It should also be mentioned here that I mounted most of the boards unpainted. In addition to the boards for the tower, I also assembled all the boards for the walls of the house. As it's actually always the same process here, we'll skip a bit. Every good castle needs a way to climb to the top, and that's where the climbing wall comes in. To start, I attached all the planks for the climbing wall. These formed the sturdy base for the climbing holes and gave the wall a clean, finished look. Next, I unpacked the climbing holes I had ordered from Amazon. To make sure they were positioned just right, I temporarily attached them to the wall with tape. I asked my mother and, more importantly, my wife about the position of the stones. When everyone approved the layout, I secured the climbing holes with screws. Each one was tightly fastened to ensure it was safe and sturdy for little climbers. No playground is complete without a sandbox. Building this feature took a mix of creativity, elbow grease, and surprisingly, a whole lot of sand. Let's dive in. I started by creating a mowing edge around the sandbox using leftover paving stones from the driveway project. This step was messy, loud and exhausting. Cutting the stones to the right size kicked up a ton of dust. Once the stones were cut, I set them in place with a bit of concrete. This mowing edge not only keeps the grass tidy, but also gives the sandbox a clean, finished look. I also added paving stones under the staircase. These serve also as a mowing edge and keep the wooden steps from sitting directly on wet soil. My son decided to join me again. His favorite role as my assistant. His help made the job slower but much more fun. I also added paving stones around the climbing wall and every post. Let's skip through this part, it's more of the same. Next I built the sandbox itself by screwing together a simple 20 cm high wooden frame. For extra functionality, I added planks on top as seating. These make the sandbox both practical and comfortable for the kids or also the parents to enjoy. Before adding sand, I laid down some weed barrier fabric to keep unwanted plants from growing through. Then came the fun part, filling the sandbox. All in all, it took a full ton of sand. Yes, you heard that right, 1 metric ton. My son couldn't wait for me to finish. While I was still pouring sand, he was already sitting in the sandbox, testing it out like a true work inspector. He had the biggest smile on his face, and honestly, that made all the hard work worth it. The sandbox quickly became the center of attention, and I could already tell it would be one of the kids' favorite spots in the castle. With the sandbox finished, the castle was almost complete. Every detail was coming together to create the ultimate backyard playground. With most of the castle complete, it was time to tackle one of the final steps, finishing the roof. For this, I used special roofing shingles made of a material similar to tar paper. This step not only made the roof weatherproof, but also gave it a polished, professional look. I started with the roof over the tunnel. The process began by nailing down the first row of shingles at the very bottom. To make sure everything stayed secure, I also used a special bitumen adhesive to glue them down. This combination of nails and adhesive ensures that the roof can withstand wind, rain and anything else the weather throws at it. From there I worked my way up the roof, overlapping each row to create a watertight seal. It's a repetitive task, but the result is definitely worth the effort. As you might notice, my outfit changes throughout the process. Roofing took several days and the weather was starting to cool down. By the end I was bundling up in a jacket as the days turned colder. This was also around the time of the major flood in our area, a reminder of how quickly the seasons and conditions can change. To add to the challenges, that year brought unexpected hardships. Our area was hit by a catastrophic flood, the kind that happens once in a century. It was devastating for so many families, and for weeks, all focus shifted to recovery efforts and supporting our community. It was a reminder of how quickly life can change and how important it is to stand together during tough times. Building this castle, even slowly, became a symbol of moving forward, of creating something magical in the face of adversity. After days of work, the roof was finally complete. It felt great to see the tunnel and playhouse fully weatherproofed and ready for anything. This was it, the final stretch. With the main structure complete, it was time to focus on the small details and decorations that would make the castle truly magical. Every piece was carefully crafted to bring my vision to life. To start, I added decorative trims to the playhouse to cover uneven cuts and hide most of the screws. I wanted these trims to look like stone bricks, so I milled grooves into the planks and cut out sections to create a granulation effect. My first attempt at painting them was, let's just say, unfortunate. The color looked like something I'll politely describe as poop. So I sanded it all down and tried again. I painted it once with the new earthy tone color. Then came the blowtorch, which added a charred black effect to bring out the texture. After that, I painted it one more time to get the perfect finish. Of course, I could have tested all of this on a scrap piece of wood first, but where's the fun in that? To secure the trims, I used mounting adhesive and black nails. The result gave the castle a polished, finished look that tied the whole design together. For an extra touch, I added small solar garden lanterns to light up the castle at night. To mount them, I designed custom decorative hooks in Fusion 360 and printed them on my 3D printer. These little lanterns added a charming glow that made the castle feel magical even after dark. For the top of the playhouse, I designed and printed a custom spire. The spire includes a spot to attach something fun, like a flag, which I plan to add next summer. In the meantime, I mounted a bright festive star for the Christmas season. It's a small detail, but it adds so much character to the castle. Even though the castle is complete for now, there's still more to come. Next summer I plan to add a swinging beam with a rope, proper windows, a door and even little pieces of furniture for the playhouse. But for now, it's ready to enjoy. The castle in all its glory. Every beam, every nail, every detail tells the story of months of work, love and laughter. This castle is more than a playground, it's a little piece of magic in our backyard.